Buyers are still sitting on the sidelines waiting for a crash to happen in the real estate market. But what they're missing is it's a great opportunity to buy right now. And if they wait too long, they may miss out.
Absolutely. Danille, I couldn't agree with you more. It's such a wonderful time to be a buyer. We have so many opportunities to leverage for them, and it's so amazing that we can negotiate for them right now in this market.
Yeah, it's such a fun time to be a buyer, right? Like, I love working with my buyers right now because it's like, this house is worth this, and what can we negotiate it down to, or can we do creative financing? And there's so many options. But what I find is a lot of times my first-time buyers, because they are waiting for 2008 to happen again, they're like, yeah, if you can get this $500,000 house down to 480, but if I wait, I bet this thing's going to go down to 450. They just don't take the opportunity, where my investors, they see it and they're like, let's get the best deal we can. This thing's going to cash flow with 20 or 30% down. Let's do it. And, that's why they get the deals, is they don't wait. And so my fear is that buyers will wait too long. And if it's a more balanced market, they don't have the same pool.
I couldn't agree with you more. The people that are just waiting for that one unicorn to appear, and it's just not going to happen. It's not going to appear. And really their unicorn is that we have all these negotiating tools. We have rate buydowns. We have creative financing, as you mentioned. And we also have more realistic sellers that, whose home has been sitting on the market for a little bit, and they're ready and willing to negotiate for the right buyer.
Yeah. And I think even if that unicorn were ever to pop up, these buyers, the buyers, like, there's buyers, and a lot of times they're investors. They take advantage of opportunity.
Right.
And then sometimes people get too wrapped up with like, this is a good deal, but there could still be a better one, and there can still be a better one. I mean, I was working with a buyer, and this really great condo deal came up, and we've been waiting and waiting, and it came up. But, on those deals, you have a day, because
that's it.
If it's really priced that well, there's multiple offers and it's gone.
Exactly.
Well, he still felt like, well, you know what, maybe a better deal, is this a good deal? Like, questioning it, and then it's gone, and
Absolutely.
then he's like, it's already sold. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, these things, like, if it really is listed low in this, like, there are buyers in this market. People
Absolutely.
act like there's no buyers. There's are buyers, and they know it's a good deal. And, even my investors a couple months ago had a deal totally underpriced, totally amazing deal that they got. New realtor just underpriced it by $75,000. We had three offers on it in day one. I mean, it just is what it is. And we got it. But at the end of the day, if they would have said, well, Danille, let me sleep on it, like, it's gone.
Well, and sometimes people have to learn that way, because then you can build that rapport and that trust that if Danille says it's going to go, it's going to go.
Yeah.
And sometimes that takes losing a property.
Yep. And I want to, negotiating right now is such an awesome thing. And I always tell buyers I'm working with right now, don't wait for the price to be this price point that you want. We need to ask for it, because sometimes these sellers are okay. You know what? Okay.
Oh my gosh, 100%. So I told you about my seller finance deal that I just did. And sometimes the number is so grossly low that you feel embarrassed to present it to the seller. And in this particular case, we received an informal offer from someone, and it was a very low offer. And I thought, there's absolutely zero chance that this seller is going to even consider this. He's going to absolutely laugh in their face. And he actually told me, maybe if you can get them to come up just a tiny bit, and even if they don't, I would take it. And so I called my husband and was like, we need to buy this house ourselves, because I can give you a better deal.
Right. And you didn't even have that formal offer in hand. But good on you for presenting it, though, because I do feel like a lot of realtors, they're like, my client will never take this. I'm not even going to present it. But the problem with that is you're not giving your client the opportunity to take the deal, because there's
Absolutely.
a lot of sellers right now, they'd rather take a creative finance deal than lower their price.
100%. And in this particular case, if I hadn't asked, I would never have known. And so that was a lesson for me, even 22 years into the business. It's like, it's not my house and it's not my decision to make. And so all I can do is present the information.
Yeah. And I think too, I've had deals like that too, where somebody's presented the offer and I swore my seller was not going to take it because, we could have got more money. I mean,
Absolutely.
sometimes, we just list a place and you get this low offer and you're like, we can make. Wait, but
There's
sometimes
no way.
the seller doesn't care. You don't understand the different sellers. Like my seller at the time had bought it for a third of what he was selling it for. He just wanted to offload it. He honestly didn't need the money.
He was ready.
Yeah, he was just ready, And so you always need to make the offer and not feeling comfortable making the offer. But then this creative finance thing is very interesting. And can you explain a little bit about the deal you did?
Absolutely. So I'm definitely a proponent of creative financing. I think it's a creative and amazing way to get deals done. And it also, at the end of the day, it always has to be a win-win situation. And so in this particular case, this house had been sitting, a little over 60 days, and the seller had improved the property. And so for the price that he wanted to get for it, he was not going to get that price in this market. We weren't getting any showings. He was getting really antsy that he had over improved the property. And so we created a win-win by doing a seller carry deal where now he is getting the price that he wants. It's going to be in 10 years. However, throughout those 10 years, he's going to be he'll be making money on the interest as well as getting the price he wants. And in the end of the day, he's actually going to make $250,000 more than he would have in today's market. Mm-hmm. And so approaching it from a savvy standpoint and being able to really understand and explain the numbers is really the key so that you are able to present that information accurately to your seller, and then they can make an educated decision after that.
And I like how you guys took it to the end and made him see that it was an extra $250 that he would be making, because I think
absolutely
a lot of times when I get these creative financing offer, the buyer is specifically focusing on what they need the seller to do for them. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
I need you to carry the loan. I need you to do this. This is my term. This is what I'm going to pay. But they don't ever sell it, to the seller. They just focus on like what works for them. But when you carried it all the way to the end to make him realize you're actually going to make $250,000 more than if you just sold it as is, I think that's really helpful when presenting.
It's extremely helpful. And I cannot tell you how many times I've come across a cross agent in a deal where the other agent had no idea what this type of financing was. Mm-hmm. And so having the opportunity to educate them and show them and bust out a piece of paper, old school.
Yeah.
And, we just did this in the office the other day, had a whiteboard out and had all the numbers written out, because until you actually calculate everything, there isn't a way for you. Now, when you're talking to a seasoned investor, they already know these things. And when you aren't, they don't know what they don't know. And so we get to educate them on how this can be beneficial for both parties.
Yeah, and most sellers are not super savvy investors, right?
No.
Most sellers are homeowners. They've owned the house a long time. Maybe it's even a rental, but a lot of them kind of fell into it being a rental. Yeah. I'd say, gosh, what do you think? Like 5 or 10% of sellers are savvy investors? I mean, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe that. And in this particular case, it was this person's first attempt, at doing this any type of home purchase at all. He had never been a homeowner, and he comes from a legacy of wealth building in real estate. And so that really surprised me that he had no idea, that this was even an option. And I think it's something that he probably would do again, given the fact that it is a win-win situation, And the other part is that the seller doesn't have a whole lot to lose when there's a good down payment involved. At the end of the day, I've had this experience twice now where the buyer actually had to give the house back. Mm-hmm. And I'm the seller's favorite person ever, because now they've kept, in this particular other case that we did, $150,000 in cash.
Yep.
Plus the buyer actually improved the property.
Right.
Added a putting green, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then gave it back in better condition than they acquired it in the first place. And so it was totally a win-win situation.
It is. It's totally win-win. I always think, you should have like an attorney look over everything to make sure it's all buttoned up if you are the seller. But the seller gets the house back. It's a win-win, and they basically are better off. I mean, what a great thing to get the down payment back and the house back. Now, I guess you could technically get the house back in worse condition depending who's buying it
as well.
Yep.
Yes.
That's a risk, but you're still getting that $150 down or what, I think the key is the bigger down payment, so that the buyer has some skin in the game too.
Absolutely.
And then that kind of hedges your risk, because as an investor, we also know that it doesn't really take that much money to get a house back aesthetically to where it needs to be.
Yes. And I think that knowing what that cost is, if you do have to foreclose and it's not an amicable situation, in both of the cases where this happened to me, they were both amicable. And in one case, the house was absolutely trashed. However, the seller was still okay because we had enough money tucked away that he knew that this was a risk. He did have his attorney review everything, and he is also a savvy person, so a savvy investor. And so it turned out okay.
Well, and I think for sellers, this is a really good option. You know, I don't have any sellers currently that are in the position that could do this, but if you can do this and you're a seller, I mean, it's a great way to get your purchase price right now.
Yes, it is.
But as a buyer, I mean, it's a really good way to present it. The other thing too is sellers are more willing to negotiate right now. I mean, I think we went through this weird point last year where we were trying to negotiate and some sellers were and some sellers weren't, because some sellers were still so tied to that high price point, you know, the peak of the market, we should call it. And they really weren't. They kind of felt like they were the head honcho still, even though it was more of a buyer's market.
Absolutely.
Where now I feel like sellers are being more realistic. Like when people are listing, like they're going in asking me, like, what's the days on market? What can we expect?
Yes.
Most of them know they're not selling in 2 weeks, you know? And so I think that gives, and to your point, when a house sits, I think that just gives you as the buyer just some leverage that you need to be taking.
It sure does. It sure does. So there's a lot of things that we can do now for buyers in terms of closing costs, getting seller concessions. And one of the biggest things is, you know how we hear marry the house, date the rate. We can do rate buydowns right now. And it's an amazing thing. We have even 3-2-1 buydowns where you have a lower rate for the first 3 years of the property, giving you the opportunity to then refinance. And most lenders now are allowing you to refinance at no additional cost down the road when it's time, when the rates actually do come down. So there's so much leverage that we have for buyers today.
Yeah, it really is great, you know, and you really can take advantage of a lot of those programs. And you can do a permanent buy down, you can do a 3-2-1 buy down, you can do a temporary buy down, but a lot of times you can have the seller pay for the buy down. And that is...
They have to pay for it, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, good to know. But yeah, so that's a really big thing right now that they're able to do.
And I think as long as we're educating the buyers how this actually works and how it benefits them, and even if they do refinance out early, it's not money lost. They actually get that and they can apply it to their principal. So it's a really fun time to be a buyer right now.
It's so fun. I love working
have
with
all
buyers.
The competition that you did. And so it's a great opportunity to get a great deal. Who doesn't love a great deal?
Yeah, everyone loves a great deal. And it's fun to negotiate. You know, it's fun to see what they'll take. Now, it depends on how you are as a buyer, though, because like I just had this buyer where she loved this property. She was so emotionally vested into this property. The seller wouldn't budge. And I think that if we had let it sit for a couple more weeks, we could have got somewhere. But, you know, it depends on the buyer, because she was like, I will be devastated if I do not get this. And I'm like, well, then we need to just pay full price then. Because,
exactly,
you know, if you're going to be devastated, I mean, it definitely could sell in the next 2 weeks. But if you are more not like, okay, you know, if I can get it for this price, I get it for this price. If not, I don't. Then we wait 2 weeks and then we reapproach with the same deal. And he's more, you know, it'd only been on the market 3 days. So he was still feeling his, you know, like he was going to get, And so, you know, so it depends how you are as a buyer too. Like I always try not to get emotional until I get the deal and actually after the inspection.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, that's a great thing to ask. It is a great option to have that conversation of, you know, hey, if we go in hard and fast or we offer this low offer, are you going to be devastated if you don't get this property? And that helps us to gauge how hard we can go, how much negotiation room we have actually.
And I have a question for you, because there's two theories right now. So, you know, a lot of buyers are nickel and diming the inspection report, right?
Yes.
So they're getting the inspection and they're, you know, racking up a bill and then they're asking for that off. And a lot of sellers are saying no, pound sand. And a lot of sellers are saying, yes, I'll take it. But so for me, I personally like to negotiate hard on the front end and tell them we're not nickel and diming the inspection unless there's anything big. But the other option is making a strong initial offer and then nickel and diming the inspection and trying to get off money that way. So kind of what's your typical angle?
So if I'm representing the buyer, my typical angle is to be firm yet fair in the negotiation of the price, knowing that we are going to have this opportunity later on to negotiate. However, I usually preface it as soon as the inspection is over. I say to the buyer, is there anything in this inspection that if the seller doesn't cover, you're okay with taking the house as is, even before we start negotiating with the seller? Because I want to know where they stand, because sellers are being firm, especially when they've already come down so much in the price. They really don't want a honey-do list of items to come over.
Yep.
And they feel offended when it does happen.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see too, like for me, and I made this mistake at the beginning when I first started, is, you know, making a strong offer and then wanting all this money off from the inspection. And then the seller says no, and then your buyer's out, you know, the money for the inspection, like, you know, there's cost to all that, right? And so I kind of prefer to negotiate hard on the front end, make the buyer comfortable with the price. Mine is if we find anything big. If we find something big, that's totally different, you know?
Deal breaker.
Like, you know, if the roof is leaking or, you know, something needs done, that's different. But if it's like, there's like $2,000 worth of handyman work that needs done, you know, I try to go in with it with my buyer, like, listen, we're getting this good price. We don't know that the seller is going to take anything else off. So before you go pay for the inspection, are you good with that? And then, of course, we still try to get money off on the inspection if we need to. But if we don't, we're all kind of okay with it.
Absolutely. And I think the magic that you said, the most important point was that you are educating your buyer up front and you're saying, look, here's the deal. We came in, we got a really great price on this. We may not get any more. And are you okay with that?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a bonus then if you do get more.
Exactly. And we always ask, listen, I will always ask for more, you know, like always ask. And, you know, the worst thing is no, right?
Even if we end up saying like, you know, let's say we're in a multiple offer situation and we say, okay, it's as is, it still doesn't mean they can't do their inspection and still ask for money off later.
Yeah.
There's a difference between asking the seller to fix something and just asking for a little bit of a credit. Because at that point, the seller, they're already this far in. The likelihood that they're going to say no 100% is a little bit lower, I think, by that point. However, you know, on the seller's side, I did just have a deal that canceled because the seller would not give any more money. They were tapped out. They were fatigued.
Yeah.
You know.
And you can have that. It hurts the seller because, you know, their days on market go up. You know, anytime something goes under contract and falls out, it's a red flag to buyers, even though it shouldn't be. It just is, you know. But I agree that, you know, you can always ask for more, but, you know, I don't like it to have buyers spend money if they're being unrealistic. You know, like sometimes I've had buyers like, oh, we want to make an offer on this property, but, you know, during the inspection, like the pool, you know, you can tell the pool needs redone. Like you have to calculate that stuff in at the initial offer.
Yeah.
You know, like if you know the HVAC system's old, if you know the pool needs resurfaced, if you know the roof hasn't been done in 20 years, like, you know there's going to be issues with it in the inspection. You just know there is. So don't pay for the inspection and then tell the seller you need, you know, a $15,000 credit. They're going to tell you to pound sand most likely. Like you need them to come in with the offer like that.
Absolutely. And to your point, it's very important that you get that seller disclosure so that the buyer can make an educated decision, because they sometimes don't know. And we as professionals, we have a gauge of, like you were saying, the roof, the big ticket items. And here in Arizona, the HVAC is such a big thing. We can't live without AC here in Arizona. So that's usually the number one thing we ask. You know, we want to know the big ticket items. You know, how old is the AC? How old is the roof? How old is the water heater? You know, typically the big ticket items that we can't see before we look under the hood, so to speak, and get the inspection.
Exactly. And all that is just small stuff usually beyond that, but usually.
Most of the time.
But it's been awesome having you on, Kim. We want to definitely do it again.
I would love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, perfect. Now we got to go.